Want to talk to you all about a little bit about GitLab. I like GitLab, so should you. Let me see if I can get this working. Nope, keyboard it is. All right, so who the heck am I and why should you care what I think? Well, I have been running Linux users groups forever, since 1994 actually, and I even do other nerdy things, like I ran for a while a Vim users group called Vim Geeks. I've been known to write a book. I do a fair bit of training for work, but in the context of this talk, the important thing is I'm a fan of GitLab. I actually got started using GitLab at my current job, and had never used it prior to that. Just kind of fell in love with it, to be honest with you. It's a darn good tool. And as a bonus, the company Onyx Point that I was working for is a GitLab partner. We have since been spun off into a separate company, and so I put a question mark on the GitLab partner thing because I'm actually not quite sure where we're at with that. But I guarantee you that if anyone listens to this and comes out of here thinking, you know what, I really could use some GitLab consulting, I guarantee you that I can fix that and find out exactly what's going on and straighten that all out. I'm a principal solutions architect at Secura. Secura does compliance automation software. So we've got a table right over there. So come see us this evening and we'll tell you all about it. So it's hard to talk about GitLab without doing a little bit of an introduction to Git. So what is Git? I think XKCD summed it up best. It tracks collaborative work on projects through a beautiful distributed graph theory tree model. And cool, how do we use it? No idea. That's pretty much it. That's how everybody feels about Git until you suddenly become a master of it because you've been using it for so long. I kind of thought that the mouse over text on this one was particularly amusing. If that doesn't fix it, git.txt contains the phone number of a friend of mine who understands Git. Just wait through a few minutes of it. It's really pretty simple. Just think of branches as ... And eventually you'll learn the commands will fix everything. I have, in fact, been the guy that said, well, it's really pretty simple. Just think of branches as... And so, yeah, anyway. I relate to this comic far too much. What it really boils down to for nerds like me who want to talk about branches and things is just a bunch of command line stuff that does things to track source control, track changes and store source code in a way that's distributed and safe and so on and so forth, right? But to be honest, that's not really the interesting thing about Git. There is lots of interesting stuff about Git, don't get me wrong. But I don't want to, I could sit here and talk about it for days if you let me. So rather than do all that, if you go to this URL or if you search for GitLab on about.gitlab.com, I think, or docs.gitlab.com, they have a page that summarizes lots of stuff about Git, and in fact, I've got the page open here. And if you look, there are resources about getting started, and concepts, and working with Git on the command line, and troubleshooting, and advanced topics, and all kinds of fun stuff, right? And it just goes on and on and on and on and on. So I don't want to spend all day teaching you about Git, because that's actually not the fun part. I do want to talk about a little history, though. So Git has been around since 2005. I won't tell you the whole sordid story behind it, but needless to say, Linus Torvalds, the guy that also gave us Linux, wanted a source control system that he could use for managing the Linux kernel. He wanted it to be distributed, he wanted it to be fast, and he wanted it to be frictionless. Because, anything else and he wouldn't use it, right? So Linus decided to write his own because, that's what Linus does. And he wrote the back end of the thing that we still call Git to this day. in a couple of weeks. Honestly, mostly knocked it out in a weekend. It was insane. The Linux kernel mailing list posts from back in that time are just a fascinating read, because he goes through all of the reasoning why he did things the way he did it, and yeah, it's a great read. Everybody jumped on to Git because it was awesome. There were other tools at the time that did similar things, but they were mostly all slow, and Git was anything but. A whole community popped up around it, started building the command line tools around it. It really took off. In 2007, development began on GitHub. I have to mention GitHub because GitHub actually gave us a lot of advancements in the way that people use Git. By the way, 2008 is when GitHub.com actually launched, but the development started on in 2007. GitHub was not only a web front end to Git that would let you like view your files and download things, and you could use it as a central repository, but it also started the idea of tacking on a wiki to a Git repo to a project, so you'd have an easy place to put documentation. And probably the most important thing that they did was prior to that, if you had a Git repository somewhere and you had a copy of the repository and you were making some changes and somebody else had their copy and you wanted them to pull in your changes, you'd have to like coordinate via email and all kinds of stuff. And GitHub made it really easy to just click, 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 done. You have something that looks like just a ticket, right? So that's when Git started to really take off, was after GitHub came along. In 2011, development began on Gitlab.com, and the story that, as I understand it, is that the guy who started building it wanted to be able to run something that looked like GitHub locally, and he wanted something that was open source, right? So GitLab gives you the ability to run something that looks like GitHub locally, and also, like say, it's open source. It has since evolved. Like in 2012, I think it was, GitLab.com launched. So there's actually a hosted version of it that you can use, much like GitHub. The GitLab, the company that started up around this, eventually became a open core company. So everything I'm talking about today is the open source version, the community edition, but there is an enterprise edition that adds additional features. All right, so enough of me yammering on. Let's go look at a demo. I have GitLab all spun up here on my laptop. And so I've only got a couple of projects in here, but you can see this is what your main page looks like, and it just kind of shows you an overview of projects that you've recently worked on. If I go into one of these projects, you can see that we have all the files in the repository. We can look at individual files as much as we want. Much like GitHub, it automatically renders your top-level README file, as in this case it's Markdown. So we've got some basic documentation. When people stumble across the repository, they can see. If we go over to the side over here, you can see we can not only look at the files, but we can look at individual commits, so we can see the Git history. We can look at branches, because branches are a thing. Tags are another thing in Git. You can tag a specific point in time, specific commit with a helpful name, and you can see like contributors and some other fun things. So. Hey, look, lots of James Evans in here. Let me see here. And there's also these fun things like you can see a graph of your changes and stuff. So as you create branches and things, they do some visualizations. So this is basically the extent of the part of GitLab that's really focused around Git per se. A lot of the stuff that makes GitLab interesting actually has very little to do with Git proper. For example, we have issues. So I wanted to remind myself what I wanted to talk about, so I created myself an issue. And we have now talked about repos, commits, branches, tags, that sort of thing. So let's talk about wikis. If we go to a project, over here on the left side, there's a wiki. And I don't have much there, but you can just go in here and you can create pages and stuff. And they've even got a spiffy new editor that'll do visual things so you don't have to do Markdown if you don't like it. But that's going to look very similar to what you'd expect if you've been a GitHub user. Let's mark that off. So let's talk a little bit about issues. So we can get our issue list. I've just got a handful in here. I've got labels on my issues. I can kind of categorize them with what kind of an issue it is. So I know that a bug may be a higher priority than tech debt or a feature request or whatever. These are just whatever makes sense for your environment, right? I'm going to go into this issue here, and this particular thing is an easy one. I actually know how to do this off the top of my head, so I'm just going to create a merge request real quick. Except I actually have to hit the button. Oh no. Demo fail. I'm having to running this all in Vagrant, and I've got a port forward, and every once in a while it tries to use the name of the VM, and that doesn't work so hot. I thought I could create Is it going to do it? No? Oh, why do you hate me? I swear I did this the other day. You know what it was? I'm an idiot, and since the last time I ran through this demo, I upgraded GitLab. I should know better. Rookie mistake. I'm out of practice. It's been 2 years, right? Anyway, what are you going to do? All right, so let's go about this a different way. So I am actually going to go into this project, and I'm going to open up the web IDE. So this is, again, built into GitLab. If you're used to using any of the Electron-based editors like Atom or VS Code, this should look very familiar because it's the same kind of backend. I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to make a couple of minor little tweaks to some files. I'm going to say mod, and I'm not going to bother explaining what I'm doing here. It's Puppet stuff. If you're not into Puppet, you're not going to care. And if you are into Puppet, you're going to know exactly what I'm doing. So I'm going to go into common.yaml, and I'm going to add ZRAM. All right, so I've made a couple of changes. You can see here that I've got a change to my Puppet file and common.yaml. I can review those changes, and I can say I already forgot what issue that was. Ugh. You're killing me, man. Go double check what issue number that was. Number 3. All right, so I'm going to say fixes number 3, create a new branch, issue 3. Really? This was working just the other day. I should be able to go. So what I was trying to do was avoid going to the help on here and seeing the little thing that says there's an update available, and so I thought I would be clever and just go ahead and do that upgrade. Okay, so actually, let's see. So we're going to say add ZRAM, and we are going to create a merge request. So if you're used to GitHub, then you're probably familiar with the idea of a pull request, right? And that name pull request, like say, comes back from the days when you would, by email say, hey, can you pull my changes from my Git repository, right? So it made some sense. GitLab decided that it made more sense to call these things merge requests because you're asking to merge this thing into your tree, right? So it is probably the single most frustrating thing as a GitLab user when you're going back and forth between GitLab and GitHub, because you'll say MR and then you'll say PR, and they both mean the same thing, but it gets when people aren't used to GitLab, you say MR and they look at you like you have two heads, and anyway, it's just a thing. All right, so anyway, so we have our merge request. We can go in here and we can double check. We'll look at the changes, and we can see I made a couple of minor changes. If we go over here to pipelines, what we see is that there was a pipeline that finished. And I'm just going to open that in another tab here. And so what I have in this project is a CI pipeline that just does a simple YAML lint and then deploys the code. Nothing too crazy, but we do a quick check with YAML lint. What this is actually doing is on a box, there is a thing called Gitlab Runner. And this Gitlab Runner is actually configured to use Docker. Fun fact though, the Docker on here is actually Podman running rootless. So that's totally a thing that you can do. One of these days I'm going to write up a whole blog post on how to do it. But if this is a thing that you're interested in, feel free to ping me directly and I'll walk you through the process. Anyway, so what this does is this grabs the Python stock container from docker.io, and it runs a simple shell script in there that installs YAML, the YAML lint Python package, and then runs the YAML lint command against the repository. And anyway, that job's not too terribly interesting. I have another job that is a little more interesting that actually deploys this Puppet code using a shell runner on my Puppet server that actually deploys the code and then runs Puppet generate types, is a thing you got to do. Fun fact about this, this is actually in a whole separate repository. The one repository, when a change is made, actually triggers this other repository to actually do the deployment. This little setup is actually something that I started building at home and realized that it was going to be helpful for a customer. And we knocked it around a little bit, got it into shape, and got it deployed at a customer site that has Puppet deployed like globally, has compile masters all over the place. So it's kind of cool. And anyway, it's fun. I could go on about that for a while too, but I'm not going to right now. Anyway, all right, so going back to our merge request, everything looks good. So I'm going to approve that, which, it was completely optional because it's my thing, but that's the way you normally do this. Normally you'd set approval rules. So, like one or two people on your team, or maybe certain specific people would have to approve a merge request, and then somebody has to actually hit the button to merge the thing, right? So we hit the button, we merge it, and what you'll see is another pipeline starts to run. So we've so this pipeline here is basically going to do the same thing that the other one did, except that it's going to deploy, instead of the issue 3 environment, it's going to actually deploy the production environment in this case. So and you can see as it does things, it just kind of shows up here. Also, we go back to the issue, one of the things that, because I had the comment fixes number 3 in here, the reason I wanted to try to find that was because that little comment then told it that when this merge request is merged, go ahead and go close the associated issue. So if we look at that issue shows up closed. I didn't actually touch that ticket, right? So anyway, now I'm going to back up just a second. I've been comparing this a little bit to GitHub up to this point, and a lot of the features of GitLab were obviously inspired by GitHub. Like I said, the wikis, the pull requests, a lot of this stuff. But then there's a lot of the features that are actually probably more inspired by some of the other potential competitors like Jira, Confluence, things like that, right? One of the cool things here is that unlike the Atlassian stack, where if you want all of this functionality, you have to install Bitbucket, and you have to install Confluence, and you have to install Jira, and then you probably need something like Artifactory for your builds and whatever. That stuff is all built into GitLab, and in fact, like I said, there's some version of it in the Community Edition, right? So lots and lots and lots of functionality. Actually, since I mentioned it, if we go over here to packages and registries, there is a package registry built in. You can drop in, forget what it is, like Maven and NPM, I think, out of the box. I don't remember exactly. There's a link that'll tell you about it. And then there's a container registry, I believe. Maybe. Let's see here, infrastructure registry. Oh yeah, there's a Terraform. There's some Terraform integration that you can do here. Actually, speaking of integrations, there's integration that you can do with Kubernetes. You can actually use GitLab directly for GitOps. You can also the runners, where I was saying I had systems that had Podman running on them that using the Docker runner. You can actually replace all of that with just a hook into Kubernetes, because Kubernetes is basically just spinning up containers, right? So why not just spin those up in a container? I am guessing that part of the reason here is, yeah, we can see the Kubernetes. So you can, like I say, you can hook this straight in. Lots and lots of stuff. What did I do? Let me go back to my ticket to remind myself what I was going to talk about. All right, so we've talked a little bit about issues, and I didn't mention there is support for epics, milestones. Oh, boards. That's what I didn't do. So yeah, so if we go back here, go back to this Puppet control repo. If we go into issue boards, I mentioned the comparison to Jira. So you can have issue boards. Now this board's just got open and closed, right? But you can also add other things. So what I was supposed to have done, and I forgot, was actually move this ticket from open to in progress while I was working on it. Show you, it just drops a label on it. So you can, any label that's available, you can make a column for it, right? So we can have our, our open, in progress, on hold, closed. I think I had one for pending review. Yeah. Probably don't care about on hold. So you can do the issue board, and so if I wanted to work on this next, I could drag that over there. If I wanted to just ignore this one for now, I could drop that into on hold. And then, like say, the closed column is tickets that are no longer open. So that happened automatically when I merged that ticket. So the issue boards are pretty cool. This is one place where I will tell you though that this is definitely a difference between the Community Edition and the Enterprise Edition. I've gotten kind of spoiled because at work we use the Enterprise Edition, and we set up boards for all kinds of things, right? So different things we're trying to track and whatever else. In the Community Edition, you appear to get a board, one, called Development. I think you can rename it, but that's about all you can do to it. So you can change the columns in it and stuff, but you can't have multiple boards, even though they have a thing to switch the boards, and there's no other boards there. Or, oh, actually, create new board. Wait, that's new. I'm sitting here talking, not even looking at the screen. This actually must have been something new in the most recent, the update that I just installed that's causing me other problems. So yeah, so what happens with the way GitLab works is they introduce features in their Enterprise Edition and on gitlab.com, and eventually they trickle those down into the Community Edition most of the time. They've got some rules about when they'll do it, how long they'll hold on to stuff in the Enterprise Edition. So this must be a thing that got filtered down into the Community Edition on the last update, which, by the way, they drop on the 22nd of every month and have reliably now for 6 or 7 years. Like every month on the 22nd of every single month, they drop a new release. So, and there's new features always. So, look at that. I can do new boards now. Neat. I could not do that the last time I ran through this. That's fun. Okay, so let's see here. All right, we've talked about that. We talked a little bit about merge requests. I gave you a little demo of CI pipelines and jobs. I mentioned the container and package registries. So talk a little bit about some other features. In your, oh, actually, let's back up before I go there. I mentioned the pipelines, but I didn't explain how that works. So the way they do this, if you're used to like using Travis or something like that, I know with Travis CI, like you'll drop a .travis.yml in the root of your project, and that's where it gets all of its configuration. So GitLab kind of works like that. There's a .gitlab ci.yaml in the top level of your project, and this defines your pipelines. So in my case, I've got a test stage and a deploy stage. Showed that to you when I was showing you the pipelines. And this is the entirety of the definition for the job that runs YAML int. And then my deployment jobs, there's a couple of variations on it. So I have a couple of different blocks down here that do different things. But this is how you define your jobs, and you can use these jobs to do builds. You can kick off all kinds of actions, just anything that makes sense, right? So I've used this obviously for Puppet deployments. That's fun. But at work we use it to build packages, like RPMs and things like that. We use it for building static websites. Because we're using a static site generator, so it'll build the website and then deploy it. Just all kinds of things. So just it's basically with the Docker runners and the shell runners, you're basically just running shell scripts. You can do custom runners that will let you basically do whatever you want to do. And not to mention the fact that GitLab also supports doing things like webhooks, right? So if you want to do things that way, so if you want, whenever there's a commit, you want to have it trigger a webhook somewhere, you can definitely do that too. The webhook thing just isn't quite as easy to configure and flexible as just being able to run shell scripts, So one of the other cool features that they added in the last couple of years is the ability to run code scanners against like static analysis tools against your code base. And the way that you run those things, basically, if you don't have a CI configuration, GitLab tries to guess what makes sense, like which things it should scan, and you know what kind of checks it should run. If you do have one, all you have to do to enable the static code analysis tools is a one-line include at the top of your .gitlab ci.yaml. Just tell it to include the code scanners. So that's pretty cool. They've got some, again, additional features in the Enterprise Edition that give you a little more visibility into all that, but those tools are available with the Community Edition as well. Okay, so I mentioned Kubernetes integration. The version of GitLab that I'm running here is what they call their omnibus install, right? So it includes everything. You basically install one massive package, and it sets up everything. So most of GitLab is written in Ruby. So it includes, you know, a vendored Ruby. It includes all the Ruby gems. It includes all of the code for GitLab itself, and all the supporting tools and everything else. It's all in one big package. They've also got some things that aren't actually related to GitLab, but are handy to have alongside of GitLab. One of them is Mattermost. If any of you are familiar with Slack, basically Mattermost is an open source alternative to it. It's actually quite nice, and it's a one-line config change to enable Mattermost when you install GitLab from the Omnibus Edition. So that's kind of cool. I actually have intentions of setting that up for some of my users group stuff. I want to get some of, right now, running on old servers, and basically I'm the only one that has access to anything, which is not really a great way to want to run a Linux users group. So my intention is to set this up and get where the website's managed, you know, all in GitLab. Everybody in the group that wants to be involved can be involved in, you know, in GitLab, and then we'll use Mattermost for, you know, talking amongst ourselves, and also then, like, you know, sending notifications whenever there's been a change or something like that, right? So cool stuff like that. I think I've mentioned Community Edition versus Enterprise Edition. Like I say, the Enterprise Edition is quite nice, and honestly, if you're a business that relies on this kind of thing, I say toss them a few bucks and you know, go for it. And that just personal opinion. You know, they've got some plans that are fairly inexpensive. But the feature list that you get really is only makes sense in a little bit larger team environment. You know, there's some stuff you can do with scoped labels. There's like, say, the issue board thing was one of them that I was going to say, but that's not a thing anymore. There's random other tools that are just kind of nice. But as you can see, though, the Community Edition is completely usable and quite nice. And if you really don't want to mess with all this, but if you like what you see here, but you don't want to mess with having to build your own servers and set this up on your own systems and whatnot, you can just use GitLab.com. GitLab.com has it's running the exact same code. They make a big thing out of that. They upgrade it on the same schedule as they drop new releases. It's basically running the Enterprise Edition. One of the things that GitLab did early on was they would let people do unlimited private repositories. GitHub, if you guys are familiar with it, until fairly recently, you could only do public repositories, right? So it was really for free, or if you wanted to use the free version, basically all your stuff had to be public. If you wanted to pay them for it, then you could have private repositories. GitLab has had the ability to do private repositories since as long as I've been using it anyway, on GitLab.com. Eventually GitHub did change things and they've added that. Actually, I apologize, I had a thought earlier and got off track. I was gonna say, GitHub has actually added a number of things that kind of look a lot like GitLab. They've added issue boards. They've added the GitHub Actions that let you run CI jobs and things like that. And absolutely don't get me wrong. I am not here to bash GitHub in any way, shape, manner, or form. I'm a happy GitHub user as well for various open source things. And if you're a happy GitHub user, don't let me talk you out of it. But I actually do think that they've been playing catch up with GitLab on a few features. Personal opinion, I'm not involved with either company, not representing either company. But yeah, so I think that was the last thing that I wanted to talk about. So let's go back over here. And are there any questions? I am completely blind, so you might have to, I see a hand over here.
So I thought it was pretty clever the way it closed the ticket automatically when you wrote fixed number 3.
Yeah.
Is that like a static statement that it looks for?
Yeah, there's a page on their in their help that actually goes through all the different variations that you can use. You can say implements or closes or fixes. You can say fixes, close, closes. There's a big long list of different variations you can use. You can also say it relates to, so it won't actually close it, but in the ticket you'll see a link to the other to the merge request. So that when you're looking at the ticket that, oh, this merge request was related to this thing, but didn't completely implement the thing, right? Funny thing, actually, all of that stuff works on GitHub too, with exactly the same syntax as near as I can tell, because I keep catching myself. I'll do the things on GitHub and realize that I was doing the thing that I had trained myself to do in GitLab, and turns out it works. And actually, anytime you say like number, like in that case I did number 3, it knew number 3 was issue number 3, right? You can actually reference like merge requests by putting an exclamation mark in front of a number and various other things. And as you're typing it, if you start typing one of those, it'll give you a list of things. So you can actually pick the thing. You don't necessarily have to know the number. Unfortunately, I kind of sort of needed to know the number a little bit here because I've got so few tickets, and I think it doesn't start expanding until you hit the first character, if I remember right. So anyway, but yeah, so there's actually, since I mentioned the help, let's go back over here. So there is a help system, built in, and this is the thing. This is the reason I updated, because I didn't want that coming up orange saying that there was an update available. But anyway, in every install of GitLab, you end up with a bunch of documentation, including, I think, that page on Git. I think that's actually right here. They've got Git basics, yeah. So yeah, I think this is no, that's not the same page. Anyway, they've got some of the same, they've got all the same documentation. That stuff's all available on the internet, but you can also just get it in your local GitLab install. I know this kind of stuff is kind of cool, because if you happen to work in a very network restricted, internet restricted environment, you can install GitLab and you get full functionality all totally offline, and it's pretty cool. But any other questions?
Well, I got one more for you, though.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. The ticketing system, is that the only ticketing system you use, or do you have other tools that you use to track work?
For work, it's the only thing we use. We've got various projects that we do that are out on, like they actually live on GitHub, and so we'll use GitHub issues for things, and we've used Jira for some things for, again, projects that host their issues in Jira. But for our work internally, we use GitLab's issues entirely. And I don't know, maybe my coworkers have some thoughts about that, but it seems like it's very functional. I'm getting thumbs up over here from the guys that care.
For me, I wasn't sure how fully functional it was, or if it was just sort of a bolt-on, hey, we have a ticketing system.
It's quite nice. I mean, it's simple. You can't do, and there's a ton of stuff that you can do with Jira, just a ton of stuff. Unfortunately, my experience with Jira is that most of the time people do that stuff, they make it too complicated for it to be usable, right? So I think in a lot of ways the ticketing system the issue system is just is the right level of complexity, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Oh, I suppose we were supposed to use a mic because I guess people watching online can't hear what we're saying. Whoops.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So what's the workflow look like when users send you a patch or merge request and it's not right and they need to rework it?
You can just put. Actually, that's great. That is a great question. So let's go.
In a follow-up, I don't want to do. I want to rebase my merges. I don't want merge commits.
Yeah. No, actually, that fun fact. I am totally with you on that. In the settings for an individual project, is that under here or repository settings? It's under. So right here in the merge request settings, you can say whether you want merge commits with a semi-linear history, or fast forward merges only. And so I say fast forward merges only, and yeah. And actually, usually what I'll do is I'll set this thing so automatically resolve merge diff discussions when become outdated. And I usually encourage the checkbox to squash commits. You can change it. So if you don't want to squash commits, you can change it. But in the merge request, it'll default to the checkbox that says to squash. And then we can also say pipelines must succeed and all discussions must be resolved, and save our changes. So now when we create a new merge request, the defaults will be changed. But yeah, in a merge request, oh, that's fun. It created the thing that I didn't actually, oh well, anyway. You can, let's go back to merge requests here and look at closed. Okay, am I in the wrong place? All. Yes, I went merged. Okay, so we go in here and we look at changes. And so when you're reviewing, you can just go in here to the diff and you can add a comment, right? So I can just go in here and I can say, you know, hey, you need to do blah, 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 or, you know, I would do it this way, or whatever. And then you can, once you've said whatever, you can either just add the comment or you can start a review. And so you can actually like go through and add all of your comments and then hit submit review. And so it'll kind of show up as one thing when you're looking at the overview, but then it shows all of your individual comments in line in, you know, when you look at the diff view. So it's kind of cool. But yeah, so that's what the general workflow looks like there. Does that answer your question? No?
What does the user do if they make those changes, though?
Oh, they just push a new commit to their branch. They
Do they have to force it, or in a different branch?
well, it depends. I mean, they can either force, if they want to like do a new commit, squash it, force push, they can do that on a branch. You can have branch protections set up so that, you know, people can't force push to like the production branch or, you know, main or master or whatever. But then they can push to, you know, their branch, you know, or you know, all they want, right? So they can either force push or they can just add another commit because it'll all get squashed when the merge request is done.
Oh, okay.
Right? So anyway, any more questions? I'm running out of time, but I got like 5 more minutes. Anybody? Yes, sir.
But you might want to mention that the commit method itself is used to generate.
That is a really good point. A little trick you guys might not know is when you create a commit message, the first line of the commit message actually gets used as the title of your merge request. And then, so what you usually want to do is you want to do a 1-line short description with a couple of line feeds after it, and then a block of text that it has whatever other information you want to add to it, right? And that becomes the body of your merge request. So let's see. we go new merge request, I can't just create one at random. I got to have changes. Anyway, I won't worry about that right now. But yeah, so first line is your title, and then the rest of it is the body of, the description of the merge request. And by the way, all of that renders as Markdown. So you can put Markdown tags in your commit messages, and those will, so if you put links in there, the links will work. You can, in your commit message, you can put that, fixes number 3 thing, and that'll just show up in the description. All that stuff just works. So it's Markdown pretty much everywhere. Actually, that's another cool thing that GitHub started doing that GitLab has followed along. Like any place that's a text box pretty much handles Markdown. And if you're as big a fan of Markdown as I am, then you should love that. All right. Any other questions? If not, if you want to get a hold of me, the QR code on the right is my LinkedIn profile. Feel free to send me a connection request. And the link on the left is a link to Secura's website. Again, we have a table right out here. We do compliance automation. And and actually I would be remiss if I didn't mention that my coworker pointed out that I should say that this entire demo is actually, that I have also pushed into GitLab, is actually all code. Every last bit of it that stands up everything. I basically just do a vagrant up, and this entire GitLab instance, including everything that's in it, gets created. I did add one other little task I have to run, so I have to run one other command line in order to create all the issues and the labels and everything else, because I also wanted to be able to use this kind of generically. So theoretically, and if this all sounds interesting, come to my talk tomorrow, because I'm actually going to talk about how I built this. So that's actually that's going to be a thing. It'll be fun, or at least for me. All right. If there's nothing else, I guess I'm done.